Hello there, thanks for tuning in to your favorite news destination. You're watching In Your Interest with me, Kabir Naqvi, and on the first segment, we talk about a story that's not just about a fuel crisis anymore. It's about how prepared is our country for a prolonged global energy shock, and could our COVID-era playbook come in handy? That's the question we're asking. We're looking at a massive shift in how India is preparing for a global storm. As tensions in West Asia escalate, the ripples are being felt here right at home. But the government's response might look familiar to you. India is reaching for the COVID-19 playbook to tackle this looming energy crisis. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he told the Rajya Sabha on the 24th of March that the situation is serious. The war has created a severe energy crisis across the world, and India is not immune to its shockwaves. Supplies of crude oil, gas and fertilizers could be hit because a large part of these shipments pass through that choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. The Prime Minister also said the adverse effects could last for a long time, and this crisis will be a major test for our country in the coming months. Prime Minister Modi also pointed out that the steps taken over the past decade to strengthen energy security are now proving useful. We have built up reserves of oil, LPG and fertilizers that can act as a buffer. Diversified import sources and a push for more domestic production are helping too. But the Prime Minister has made it clear that in the long run, India needs a strong and clear strategy for energy security so that we're not so heavily dependent on the imports. Now, to deal with it, the government has gone back to a model that worked during the COVID-19 pandemic. 7 new empowered groups were formed. These groups of senior officials will act quickly on supply chains, petrol and diesel, natural gas, fertilizers, the rising prices, to keep all of that in check. And they will monitor the situation on each day and suggest steps to keep essential items flowing smoothly. The centre and states are being asked to work together once again to ensure all stakeholders are on the same page, just like the successful Team India approach we saw during the pandemic.
तो परिस्थिति पश्चिम एशिया में ईरान, इजराइल, अमेरिका के बीच में संघर्ष के वजह से जो उत्पन्न हुआ है, उससे भारत को किस तरीके से प्रभाव पड़ेगा और भारतीय लोगों के लिए सरकार ने क्या क्या कदम उठाया है, इसके बारे में कई सवाल विपक्ष के साथियों ने किया और सरकार की ओर से व्यापक अच्छी तरह से जवाब दिया। और अंत में सारे विपक्ष के साथियों ने ये कहा है कि संकट के इस घड़ी में सरकार जो फैसला करेंगे, जैसे परिस्थिति है उसके हिसाब से कदम उठाएंगे, तो सब एकजुट होकर के साथ देंगे, ये सबने कहा है।
राहुल गांधी जब से स्पेशली ये 10 साल में 12 साल में तो जब भी मौका मिला है, ही हैज स्पोकन द लैंग्वेज ऑफ पाकिस्तान, एंड नाउ after demanding all party meeting, Rahul Gandhi is also absent, TMC is also absent, means how irresponsible behavior they are, exhibiting. That itself shows that they are not having any interest about the India's welfare.
जैसे कोरोना के समय में अलग अलग सेक्टर्स की चुनौतियों से निपटने के लिए एक्सपर्ट्स और ऑफिसर्स के एम्पावर्ड ग्रुप्स बने थे, वैसे ही कल ही ऐसे 7 नए एम्पावर्ड ग्रुप्स का भी गठन किया गया है। ये ग्रुप सप्लाई चेन, पेट्रोल डीजल, फर्टिलाइजर, गैस, महंगाई ऐसे विषयों पर त्वरित और दूरगामी रणनीति के तहत कार्रवाई करने का काम करेंगे। मुझे पूरा भरोसा है कि साझा प्रयासों से हम परिस्थितियों का बेहतर सामना कर पाएंगे। बीते 5-6 साल में देखिए, कोरोना की महामारी के बाद चुनौतियां एक के बाद एक बढ़ती ही गई है। ऐसा कोई साल नहीं है जिसने भारतीयों की परीक्षा न ली हो, लेकिन 140 करोड़ देशवासियों के एकजुट प्रयास से भारत हर आपदा का सामना करता हुए आगे बढ़ रहा है.
That was the Prime Minister's message at TV9's flagship summit, What India Thinks Today. But even as we're talking about this COVID era playbook, let's quickly tell you how the Asian nations are now scrambling to ensure energy security for themselves, because this is not only an Indian story. Many countries in Asia are facing the same problem because they buy more than 80% of the crude oil that moves through that very choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. Several nations have started bringing back measures that look similar to what we did in the COVID times. South Korea and Pakistan are encouraging people to work from home to cut down on travel and fuel use. Thailand has asked offices to keep air conditioners above 25 degrees, avoid suits, use stairs more often instead of elevators, and skip non-essential foreign trips, especially for the leaders there. And Sri Lanka has added a weekly holiday into the week. The Philippines is trying a shorter work week, and Japan has put in big money to cap fuel prices. So has New Zealand, by the way. Across the region, people are being asked to take shorter showers, drive less, use efficient appliances, and speed up the shift to electric vehicles. And the idea is simple: reduce demand and give targeted help where it is needed the most. Ultimately, this crisis highlights India's biggest vulnerability: our 85% dependence on imported energy. The government is signaling that Atmanirbhar energy is no longer just a slogan. It is a matter of strategic sovereignty. And if we want to reach the goal of a Viksit Bharat by 2047, we cannot be at the mercy of global oil prices or a choke point like the Hormuz. The future backbone of our country must be built on renewables. We're talking nuclear power, green hydrogen, add that to the list. Only then will India have the true freedom to grow regardless of what happens beyond our borders. An esteemed set of panelists with me on the broadcast tonight, and the big questions that we're trying to decode. Can a strategy designed for a public health emergency effectively manage a complex, market-driven energy crisis? Can the center and states work together as smoothly as they did in the COVID times? This is a different situation, mind you. Or will politics get in the way? Does this crisis provide the final urgent push needed to move India from 85% import dependence to a truly self-reliant green energy economy? With us on the broadcast, Prafulla Pathak, energy expert. And let's try and break this down. We're going to be joined by a trade ambassador. We're going to be joined by, economist as well. But let's get the snowball rolling with the energy expert with us on the broadcast, Mr. Pathak. Mr. Pathak, help the viewers understand. So many countries are already talking about work from home. It's definitely there on the table. So many countries are talking about not, using the shower for a very long time. We have real life examples like the Ukraine war, where in Ukraine people were asked not to use the highways with the speed limits. They were cut down. Not to drive to their, carpooling was something that was spoken about. And now things are getting serious by the day. Even as talks are happening between US and Iran, we're looking at a COVID era playbook, something that the Prime Minister has already spoken about. What's your opinion? Nearly 80% of Asia's oil passing through the Hormuz. Is the COVID era something that playbook that we can take up from? Are there some lessons that we learnt during the COVID times? This is the difference.
Your query. In fact, as Honorable Prime Minister has said in his speech in Rajya Sabha, the measures which are taken about the empowered group formation and all that, it has a model that we have used during the COVID era. That is what we did 5 years back. But looking at the 24 days of war that is going on, and though we are not directly India is not directly in that, but there are possibilities that as the days progress, as the time progress, we may have to face some things which you have mentioned. Other Asian countries are taking the measures. So it is better to get prepared before we come across the situations. That is what I think our situation is, and that is what our honorable
I think we are prepared. I think we are prepared. But, according to your own estimate and understanding, how long before we finally have to bring in measures like work from home, bring in measures like, energy rationing at home?
In fact, see, we are prepared, and see, last these days we have seen that we are much better than other Asian countries, and in that case, it is now, I think, from the people of my country, our country, that we have to take some small measures. The most important measure is panic buying. That is one thing which we have to avoid, because whatever stocks or things we have, if some rumors or something comes in, social media plays a very big role in these days. So if you come across any such rumors or something, then people has to think calmly, and we have to avoid the panic buying, because if
you're
you
right,
buy,
but easier said than done, Mr. Pathak. Easier said than done. People are now safeguarding petrol in their cookers at home, various ways of hoarding, on petrol. I can see Ujjal Singh Bhatia, former ambassador to WTO, with us on the broadcast, and Shubhamoy Bhattacharjee, consulting editor, the Business Standard, with us on the broadcast as well. Many thanks, gentlemen, for taking out the time. Ambassador, I'm going to quickly come to you. Give us a sense of how you're looking at this, even amid talks, US in Iran. We're learning how Pakistan is going racing to broker this deal. Whether that's going to happen or not, we don't know. But it seems like the chess pieces are finally moving for this end game. It's still early doors. It's all speculative. But India has activated a full war room. The Prime Minister has spoken about those 7 departments that have been activated, 7 empowered groups. Does this now signal that New Delhi expects a prolonged disruption in the Gulf, not just a temporary crisis? And what have we learnt during the COVID-19 pandemic that can be brought into play over here? Mind you, those are 2 different situations. That time, demands had gone down. Now, prices are coming up, sir.
Well, I think the Prime Minister has done well to caution the country that this crisis could take a long time in terms of its effects. But at the same time, this is not a time, I believe, for panic.
Okay.
We need to tighten our belts. We need to be ready for hard decisions. But I think there are also some hopeful signs. Mr. Trump says they are negotiating. And yesterday, I think Iran made an interesting statement in the International Maritime Organization that the strait is open for non-oil countries. So this is a time for diplomacy. I think it is also a time for certain resets of our policies. For instance, there is a perception that India may have gone too far in its association with Israel. And I think this reset also is required because of our huge interest in the Gulf countries. But let me go on to certain key decisions that I think we need to take. The first, of course, is that it is important for the people to realize that this is a fluid situation, and things could become worse. But at the moment, I think whatever the government has done in terms of invoking the Essential Commodities Act, in terms of activating the Mundra power plant of the Tatas to produce imported coal power, etc. I think these are very, very positive decisions. I think there is one more issue that we need to emphasize, and this is that the issues of energy security for India, the issue of food security for India, these are paramount considerations for us. And I think we should not be guided by other countries in our decisions of what to buy and from whom to buy. Specifically, for instance, as far as energy purchases from Russia are concerned, India has made its mind very clear that India will buy energy from Russia. But Russia also happens to be one of the largest producers of fertilizer in the world, as far as ammonia is concerned, or urea, or potash, and so on. And I think India should not wait for any signals from anybody else to firm up such deals. And we also need to take steps to double down on our green energy programs, because as far as energy security going forward is concerned, it is important that we rely on our own sources. So let me stop here for the moment. Yeah,
many thanks for your opening submissions, Ambassador. You pointed out that Donald Trump has said that some talks are going on, but I can give you a list of 20 examples where Donald Trump has walked back on something that he said. can you really take him seriously? It seems like he's speaking in one voice and Washington speaks another voice at this point in time. And in the shadow of these talks, Israel continues to do on what it is doing in Lebanon. So we really don't know how prolonged this actually is going to be. But Shubhamoy, let me bring you into the picture. We're talking about the COVID era playbook here. We're seeing a return to these COVID era playbooks. There are some signs and hints. Nostalgia would take us down a very grim memory lane, but we do need to go back to our lessons that we learned. So what was it that we did right during COVID-19 that can be instantly brought into the playbook right now? There are various countries that are talking about subsidies, New Zealand, Australia, with various countries talking about a shorter work week. Take a look at what's happening in Thailand, in Philippines, even South Korea, an industrial powerhouse. They're saying it's a great idea. Work from home sounds like a great idea right now.
One of the things that we should not do is to curtail work.
Okay.
That is going to be a very dangerous thing. Because what the Indian economy needs, sure, is more energy. Obviously, energy is in short supply. But if the economic process is slowed down, that is not something that you would want, because that immediately hits back onto our growth. You don't want the economy to slow down. In the COVID period, there was no choice. Economic forces had to be slowed. People had to be sort of, not furloughed, at least even to tell that, work from home and basically see what best you can do. That is not the situation here. The big thing that the government is doing, which is right, which is basically getting the whole of government approach into it. So there are not just the petroleum ministry's responsibility, there are now responsibility being apportioned across the board, across the different ministries. That's a great thing. In fact, that is a great lesson from COVID, that the government has got the whole of government approach going. But India clearly, if it tries to slow down the economy, already there is slowdown that is coming to us from the global shock. We don't want that slowdown to sort of translate to be magnified by us working less. So, you could say that cars need to go less or other things to happen. But frankly speaking, then that's not the point. India is buying a heavy amount of oil from Russia. It has already bought 60 million barrels per day from April. That is more than what it needed for the total month. So India is actually positioning itself to keep its oil flow on. The risk is basically for the LPG. And that is where the struggle is. In terms of fertilizer, we have got the Kharif totally cared for. Kharif production is not a problem. What we'll have is a problem that when we go in for the Rabi fertilizer, for that, India will then have to marshal resources. But that would mean that the economy should be working at a very fast pace. Growth should not be curtailed. If growth gets curtailed, then actually that hits into the basis of the Indian economy. So, and definitely that's not what the government is looking at. And that is something which is very, very significant.
That's a very credible point. So you're saying, no lockdown scenario. Let's throw that out of the picture completely. But the energy rationing that we're talking about, you're saying that's going to curtail and push us back as well. I've been citing examples of what's been happening in Ukraine. They pushed down the highway speed limits by another, 20 miles an hour. Those kind of limited restrictions, limited curbs, won't they work as well?
No, they would not. Because in India, that sort of a thing, government can't really enforce that sort of stuff across the country because of lots of reasons. India is not a country which, switches on and off. And by doing that sort of a stuff, we actually will be ending up creating more challenges for people, creating more obstacles when you don't want it. So that is definitely not on. And I'm sure the government is not working on those sort of principles right now. The idea is to ensure that what the economy needs, the economy gets from all sources. So it is diversifying. Coal is being brought in a very massive way to ensure that electricity demand is being, really being helped. And all sorts of things to ensure that there's alternative energy.
Several points being raised in the all-party meet as well. Shubhamoy, I'm going to come back to you, to discuss and decode what was discussed in that all-party meet. Apart from the politics that's happening with the TMC and, the ruling dispensation hitting out at Rahul Gandhi for, coming at this all-party meet after he demanded the same. We'll keep the politics aside. We'll talk about exactly what we need to talk about right now. The energy expert with us on the broadcast, Mr. Pathak. Shubhamoy spoke about the blind spot that we have, which is no real buffer for LNG and LPG. That seems to be our problem at this point. We've got strategic petroleum reserves for crude. It seems like we've got enough elbow space on that front, but not enough for LNG and LPG. And I think this is high time that we talk about that and we do a pivot to start focusing on our LNG and LPG reserves as well.
In fact, in that way, we are quite smooth till today. And whatever the happening is not that something which we have to, but these type of measures which we are taking in, or whatever Prime Minister has said to the nation. So these are the measures, and these are definitely beneficial. Since the war is there, the Indian scenario is quite smooth, I believe. Yes, there is a possibility that we have to take some actions so that we can continue with the same. As you was mentioning about the LPG and LNG, that efforts are going on to make it up. And you also mentioned about the energy transition and renewables. So I think renewables has also played some important role in these days, because whatever the capacities we have achieved in these days, so renewable energy is in support to us. And the need is to consider the situation. It is not like what it was in COVID period. We are much better than COVID. But yes, the model which we have adopted, the groups which has formed on the basis of the COVID period, and this is a good thing. We are taking the measures quite early so that the situation will be in our hand, and we can take the measures.
Okay.
So
okay.
Energy transition and energy security, these are the two things which I think, yes, we have some, we have maybe whatever we have earlier, we have to take some steps so that there are some restrictions in our day-to-day life.
Okay, so you're of the opinion that there might be some limited restrictions. Shubham does not agree with that. And, you rightly pointed out, Mr. Pathak, renewable energy, that needs to be our new focus. Rooftop revolution, solar panels on each rooftop, that's the story that we've been tracking very closely here on In Your Interest as well. Shubham, I'm going to come to you. Let me bring in the ambassador once again. Ambassador, talking about more rerouting from the Strait of Hormuz, we already know that there are 5 LPG-laden ships that are en route. 2 or 3 have successfully crossed as per that interministerial briefing that was done by Mr. Sinha, I think, who's the Secretary of Ports. And that we're talking about higher insurance costs, our own military naval escorts, they're on the each side of these shipping vessels that are en route, the Indian ports. And then there is a structural spike in our import bill as well. So India's trade architecture, where is that headed? Your expertise on that, sir.
Well, it's going to be a very difficult period. Our exports are going to be under severe pressure. The rupee is also going to be under a lot of pressure. So I think it's best that we do not underplay that part of the story. But whether we like it or not, issues of energy security and food security, they have to be topmost in the government's agenda. And if the LPG imports or LNG imports cost more from other sources, so be it. There will need to be subsidies. There will need to be increasing domestic prices. But as Shubham said, as far as fertilizer is concerned, the Kharif season is more or less taken care of. But we need to start working on our requirements of fertilizer for the Rabi season, and the time to start is now, even though the prices may be inflated. So overall, I think there is no scope for reducing work. We need to continue to work on as ever before. There will be hard choices to be made, and there will be belt tightening to be done, and subsidies to be provided, and prices will have to rise. Our Goldilocks period of high growth and low inflation and manageable deficits, that is going to be under severe challenge. But I think overall, fiscally, the government has the resilience and the resources to manage that.
Well, that's a positive note. Shubham, I'll give you the final word on this particular segment. Central banks, globally, they're hinting at rate hikes despite this growth slowdown. This is a classic stagflation scenario that we're looking at dealing with. And, what do you make of all the interministerial briefings, the kind of resilience that the, secretaries are talking about, and even the all-party meet that happened today? Everybody said that, yes, there are energy requirements, there are needs, and we do need to constantly add more sources to, our imports. But we have enough elbow space, enough wriggle room, enough resilience to iron all of those issues out. And I think the most positive point that you said in your opening submission was that, it's the Rabi season that we'll have to worry about. Kharif is all under control at the moment.
That's right. And April 8th, RBI comes out with its monetary policy. I do not expect it to raise rates. It might keep the rates at the same level. It probably will not cut. That's almost now given, but it's definitely not going to raise rates. 1 quarter of this destabilization we can handle. If it goes beyond a quarter, and that means we are talking about April, May, June. So if it goes beyond that, then it becomes sticky for us. So that's about it. As far as LNG storage is concerned, let me tell you, there is no way in the world that one can have an LNG storage. LNG evaporates. There's a fast evaporation. There's a reason why no country in the world has LNG storage in a big way. The reason for that is that LNG doesn't lend itself to storage. And so therefore, it's a just-in-time economy. That is why, as you rightly pointed out, there's a crisis that if the LNG ships don't come, then what happens to the LNG requirements?
Yep.
Now, that is something that the world economy had worked on, that LNG will need to be brought in time to be able to flow. While Qatar's LNG force majeure means that there's going to be a huge disruption in LNG, remember, if Iran gets a deal with USA, whatever the deal, and will mean Iranian gas. Iran essentially sells gas. There's a huge amount of gas that is there from Iran that will come into the world economy. And that is something that is something to look forward to. I expect the fiscal deficit of India to rise in this year. Definitely, there will be much more difficulty in that stance. Prices, yes, to a certain extent, quite a few of the prices would rise. Adjustments will happen. As Mr. Bhatia and Mr. Pathak were both pointing out, inflation will tend to rise. That's sure enough. There will be some amount of inflation. But as of now, we don't have a crisis where we can't manage with the advantages that we have. And I think that's where it's a very unusually good situation from where India is starting off. India can buy the energy at whatever the price is that's there, and it's been buying at close to 150 a barrel. And that's saying a lot, that the government is very clear that it will keep on buying. It will not stop